Well, welcome, Facebook Live viewers. I appreciate you joining us once again. As you know, I'm Brad Bodis. I'm an attorney with the Bond and Bodis Law Offices. We're located throughout Alabama, throughout Mississippi, and in the Knoxville area in Tennessee. And we help people with money problems. And there are a lot of people with financial problems right now. COVID and 2020 has been a tough year on all of us. Today, I am very pleased to be joined by Mark Melton. Mark, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me.
So for our viewers, Mark is by day what I would call a highfalutin tax lawyer. He's does a lot of corporate work, does a lot of tax work, but he's really become a hero in 2020. Mark, as I understand it, when COVID first started up, you started responding to some questions you got about relief that might be available to renters and homeowners. And then the snowball kind of picked up from there. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, I always joke that this really happened by accident. Back in March, I was just posting explainers on social media about the eviction moratoriums and some of the stay-at-home orders and things like that. And those posts started getting shared thousands of times, and I found myself spending 15 to 18 hours a day responding to emails and questions, and just hearing people's individual stories. And so after about a week of that, I put out another request on social media for some of my fellow lawyers here in Dallas to help me out. And over the last 10 months, we've recruited over 150 lawyers that have volunteered, and we've helped over 4,500 tenants in Dallas County at this point navigate the eviction moratoriums, all the housing assistance and rent assistance programs, and trying to keep them in their homes.
Well, we hear too many negative stories, especially over the last year, and and attorneys are too often included in those negative stories. But there are a lot of good people doing hard work, and I personally appreciate what you're doing, and I'm sure there are a lot of people in the Dallas area that are also appreciative. So, Mark, my firm, we work primarily with people that are having financial problems. We do consumer bankruptcy work. We do a lot of Chapter 13 and Chapter 7 bankruptcies for people that are facing foreclosures, facing evictions, facing money issues. And of course, all of those issues have intensified and changed in 2020. We now have a new president coming into office. We have some new legislation here. Although there is a vaccine, it's not expected to get out in large numbers for a number of months. So I wanted to do today's Facebook Live episode and provide an update for our viewers as to relief available, both under the old legislation and the new COVID bill that President Trump signed into law just this past week. And I thought, who would be better than one of the people that's been at the forefront of this fight on behalf of consumers and people facing these legal challenges and financial challenges over the last year than you. So, Mark, the new legislation, there was some question as to whether or not it would be signed, but it now has been assigned, and it has become law. Let's start kind of step by step as to what's included. The most immediate relief will be the stimulus checks. What can you tell us about the checks and when people will start receiving them?
Well, the Treasury Secretary has said that they'll start doing ACH payments as soon as January 4th. So next week, some people will start to see those checks appear in their bank accounts. if you were one of those people that got your check automatically deposited in the last stimulus check, you're probably already good to go. Some of the issues will come up for people that didn't file tax returns. And I'm sure that the IRS will do what they did last time with a special portal on their website where you can go in and include your information so that you can get your stimulus check. But obviously that information is forthcoming, and Treasury and the IRS have not given any guidance yet since it's only been a couple of days. But some people will start to see that money as soon as next week.
Well, that'll be a welcome relief to a lot of people. $600 is not a significant amount of money, but as I understand the legislation, for certain head of households or families, there will be more than just the $600. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's $600 per person in the household. So for a family of 4, it's going to be $2,400.
And that will be for people, I believe, individuals with an income of less than $75,000. I believe it goes up beyond that for a household or for a head of household.
Yeah, that's correct. So for most people in the United States, they'll qualify, and they should expect to get a stimulus check, hopefully in January.
Well, that's great. And I know a lot of people are in need of that type money. Just straying off topic a little bit here, but we've had a lot of questions as to what's the best thing to do with that money. I've been telling people, I'll let you, add your share, but I've been telling people to the extent possible, save that money. We don't know if there'll be another stimulus check or whether there'll be additional relief, and to use that money only as necessary. What advice do you have?
It really is depending on the personal situation, but I think it's a good segue into the CDC order itself, right? Because one of the requirements to qualify for protection under the CDC order is that you have made at least best efforts to make a partial payment on back rent. And so even if it's not the full $600, to the extent that you can afford to make any kind of partial payment, even if it's 10 or 20 or $100 or something like that, it's in your interest to try to do that, even if your landlord refuses to accept it, because now you can at least have some evidence in a court to show that you've checked that box and that you've attempted to make that partial payment to possibly qualify for the CDC protection.
Let's let's speak in a little bit more general terms as to the CDC protection. You're talking about the protection available for tenants, for people that are renting their homes or apartments. Can you explain that in a little bit more generally for our viewers that are worried about evictions and exactly what will be provided going forward?
Sure. So the CDC order was issued in September originally, and it applies to anyone that's a renter in all 50 states. There are a couple of important points to note, though. The first one is that the moratorium by the CDC is not an automatic process. So it doesn't stop people from filing eviction suits. It doesn't stop judges from ruling on them. All it does is if you are a qualifying person, and we can talk about that in a second, you have to take some action to take advantage of the protection, meaning that you've got to give a declaration to your landlord that certifies 7 or 8 different things. And as long as those things are all true, then the landlord cannot physically evict you. They can still go through the process. They can still even get a judgment for eviction. They just can't remove you from your home until it was December 31st. But in this new legislation, Congress extended that deadline to January 31st. And so what that declaration says is a few things. And by the way, you have to sign this thing under penalties of perjury. And so it's important that they're actually true when you sign this thing and give it to your landlord. The first one is you have to have made best efforts to get rent assistance. And so, under the CARES Act in the summer, there were billions and billions of dollars that were allocated to rental assistance programs. And based on where you live, you would contact your city or the county. Some states are now doing rent assistance programs. In Dallas, where I live, the city allocated millions of dollars to United Way, who formed a collaborative of other nonprofits to dole out rent assistance. But you just have to have made best efforts to get rent assistance. It doesn't say you have to have actually received it. And so one of the things that you'll want if you have to go to court to defend this declaration is, if you get an email back that says thanks for applying or any kind of updates like that, that's something you should save, because you'll want to be able to present that to a judge to prove that that element of the CDC order is accurate. The second one is you have to make under $99,000 a year if you're a single person, or $198,000 a year if you're a married couple. Um, those kinds of things are fairly self-evident, but you need to be able to prove that. And so any kind of tax return from a prior year, or a check stub, or a W-2, or anything that will show that your income is under those levels is good evidence to just have on the ready in case you've got to defend this thing. The other one is you have to show that you have some kind of substantial decrease in income or extra medical bills that has occurred during COVID. It does not say that it has to be as a result of COVID. So you don't have to prove up that you were laid off or furloughed because of a business closure, just that you had a substantial decrease in income for any reason. And so typically what we're doing is getting letters from prior employers that say this person was terminated for, they were furloughed or reduction in hours or whatever the situation may be, just so that you can show that there's that decrease in income. And then finally, you have to have demonstrated that you've made best efforts to make a partial payment on your back rent. And as long as all these things are true, there's a few other certifications in there that just say, I understand that this is not a rent holiday. The CDC order does not forgive rent. It doesn't wipe out late fees or anything like that. I still owe the rent at the end of the day. And if you sign that and give it to your landlord, then you should fall under the protection of the CDC order. Keep in mind that this protection only applies if you're being evicted for the non-payment of rent. So if your landlord is evicting you for criminal activity or property destruction, or your lease is up and you're now a holdover tenant, those types of things are not protected by the CDC order. We've actually seen a lot of landlords that have made pretextual arguments that we're not trying to evict them for non-payment of rent, we're trying to evict them for some other lease violation. And so you've got to be prepared to be able to show that those are pretextual arguments that aren't the real reason the landlord's trying to evict you.
I want to remind my viewers here, Mark just shared some tremendous information. Our Facebook Live episodes live on our Facebook pages, and I want to encourage folks that have questions about what's contained in the protection and exactly what steps need to be taken in order to protect yourself. You can go back to these Facebook Live episodes, or you can refer a friend, somebody else that may be interested in this content, because as Mark just explained, you just don't get the benefit of this relief by doing nothing. You have to take affirmative action. You have to take steps to protect yourself and to stop the eviction from being completed. Like so many other things we've talked about during these episodes, don't just sit back, learn your rights, and take affirmative action. And if you need help, seek advice. Again, the bond and bonus law offices are located throughout Alabama, Mississippi, and we're in the Knoxville area in Tennessee, and we help people with money problems. And during COVID, we are offering absolutely free initial consultations from the safety of your home or office by phone or video, like I'm meeting with Mark today. So folks, reach out for help. Help is available. Mark, are the protections available with respect to foreclosures similar to those with respect to evictions? What can you offer in that regard?
They're really not. There are some protections under the CARES Act. Most of the protections for homeowners come in the form of forbearance programs. Generally, they only apply to mortgages that are financed through federally backed mortgages. So if your loan is owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or one of the securitizations that they've sponsored, which is kind of difficult to know, right? Because you just get a letter from your servicer, and so sometimes you just have to call your servicer and ask, is this a federally protected mortgage where I can get some forbearance? As long as it is, you can get a 180-day forbearance on your mortgage payments with an additional 180 days if you request it. So you can get up to a full year of forbearance on mortgage payments. Some of the lenders it's kind of a weird program. You would think forbearance is just going to tack that payment to the end of your mortgage. That's not necessarily always the case. And a lot of these, the forbearance, if you do 6 months, they want you to pay up all that back rent by the end of the 6 months. So it's not like it's just a free mortgage holiday that you can, pay back in year 31 of your mortgage.
So again, for our viewers, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, or what most of us know as HUD, has extended the foreclosure moratorium with respect to these certain type federally backed mortgages that Mark described through January 31st. But I can assure you that plenty of foreclosures are still going forward. And Mark, this is such an important issue for many of our viewers because in Alabama and in Mississippi and in Tennessee, we're non-judicial foreclosure states. The foreclosure process takes place without any type of court proceeding, and it's relatively quick. There are options available to our viewers, both through the HUD program, through the programs being offered by some of the servicers out there. But you have to be proactive. You have to reach out, and you need to know what your rights are. And although those 6 months of mortgage payments may be delayed, they may all become due at once. And there are options available in that situation. We've discussed Chapter 13 bankruptcy in some of our past episodes, which would give you an opportunity to catch up what you're behind over a period of up to 5 years. But you should consult with an attorney and know what your rights are. Mark, I do want to talk about the supplemental unemployment benefits that are available. Not quite as much money as last time, but there is a supplement that will become available. Can you share what you know about that for our viewers?
Well, it's kind of a two-part issue. So first of all, the law extends unemployment benefits. There's always limitations on the number of weeks that you can get unemployment. So this bill extends the number of weeks you can get unemployment. It also adds an additional $300 per week. That is a federal subsidy. So everyone may remember in the summer we had $600 a week that was getting tacked on to everyone's unemployment checks. Now it's only $3, which I suppose is still helpful. But at the end of the day, probably still not enough. I mean, if you look at the amount of money that people are behind on rent and mortgage payments, I know in Texas, the U.S. Census Bureau just passed, or didn't pass, they just published their Pulse Household Survey a few weeks ago. And it showed in the state of Texas, we have more than 1 million people here that are either behind on their rent or their mortgage payments or expect to be in the next 30 days. And so, when you look at these programs that put out, for example, the governor of Texas just did an eviction a diversion program that he put $165 million worth of CARES Act money into. But if you divide that by the million people that need that money, that's an average of $165 a person that's really available to provide this aid. And so the scale of this problem is really, it's enormous. And, a lot of the housing advocates and the Poverty Lab and people like that are estimating that, if we don't have these types of government interventions, we could be looking at as many as 30 to 35 million homeless Americans in the first quarter of 2021 and as a direct result of not being able to pay rent and mortgage payments from COVID.
It's I keep telling people as a bankruptcy attorney, it's almost like a ticking time bomb out there. Bankruptcy filings, surprisingly to a lot of people, have been down dramatically in the second, third, and fourth quarters of 2020, but most experts expect them to go up dramatically in 2021. And again, I want our viewers to know there are options available. A Chapter 13 bankruptcy will allow you to catch up what you're behind on your mortgage, on your rent in certain circumstances, on car payments, and take up to 5 years to do it. In fact, there are provisions in the new legislation that will allow certain types of bankruptcies to be extended over a period of longer than 60 months. But don't wait until it's too late. Reach out. There are plenty of options and plenty of people available that can help you with this. I do want to remind our viewers that all of these episodes, including today's with Mark Melton, who is an authority on issues related to COVID relief, live and reside on both our firm's website and on our Facebook page. If you know somebody that you think this information will be helpful to, please refer them back here so that they can listen to the information that Mark is providing today. We do these Facebook Live episodes every Wednesday at 1 o'clock p.m. Central Time. We took off last week for Christmas, but prior week we had an expert on veterans law and security clearance work. Ron Sixtus, who does a lot of VA benefit work, provided a lot of information. And we'll go forward with these shows. Now, Mark, I appreciate your time, and we have some questions that are starting to come in from our viewers that I'd like to put before you and to our viewers. If you want to post a question, please feel free to do so. We'll try to get through to several of them while Mark's on the phone. The first one asks about relief available to small businesses. Another round of PPP loans, it looks like. What do you know about the new PPP loans and who they'll be available to, Mark?
Well, they allocated, I think it was another $186 billion or something in that neighborhood, a significant amount of money to a new PPP program. If you already applied for a PPP loan in the last round, you'll still be able to apply again. There were some beneficial changes in just the tax consequences of these PPP loans that are very taxpayer friendly and will allow additional write-offs even if your loan is forgiven at the end of the day. But I assume similar to the last round, the money went really fast and a lot of people missed the boat because they waited too long to make the application. And so I would keep a really close eye on the SBA website and to your personal bank. Whoever you bank with as a small business, that's where you're going to go apply for these loans. And the SBA just guarantees them through your bank. So you can apply for EIDL loans or certain other kind of disaster relief loans directly through the SBA. But typically, you're going to do this with your bank. So my recommendation is you should call your banker. It's probably early next week. I'm sure that most of the bankers are probably not at the office today, but you should have that conversation sooner rather than later to find out what their process is going to be for taking applications and start pulling that information together so that you're at the front of the line and not at the end.
I will have to say, in defense of bankers, a lot of them broke the old mold and worked a lot of additional hours with the last round of PPP loans, and I expect they will be with this next round. I even got a response from my banker on a Sunday evening, which may have been unheard of. Mark, let me borrow upon your tax expertise. Now, the provisions in the new legislation impact the way in which the expenses that were paid for by the loans can be treated. Is that accurate? Can you explain that in general terms?
Yeah. So just to vastly oversimplify this, generally speaking, if you go borrow money and then it's forgiven, that forgiveness of debt is taxable income in and of itself. In the PPP program, that's definitely not the case. That loan forgiveness is not taxable income. What the IRS and Congress had done in the first round is they said, we'll give you this money that we're going to forgive. And since you're not having to pick up the income for that, you also don't get to deduct any of the expenses for whatever you're using this money to pay for. So if you're paying employees or rent or utilities, usually you would be able to deduct those as business expenses. But under the old rules, you couldn't do that because really it was the government paying those bills, not you. And so their thought was, why would you get a tax deduction for bills that you didn't pay and we did? So those rules have now changed. There's a lot more flexibility in what you can deduct. And so I think that one is really kind of just a boon for small business owners to be able to take tax deductions for expenses paid with what are really essentially federal dollars.
And Mark did a great job of explaining that in simplified terms, but for those of you running small businesses, it's a very important change, and you certainly should talk to a tax expert, whoever you had that helps you with your taxes and what you could deduct. Please make sure you're aware of these changes, which are very beneficial. As I understand it, Mark, there's also a change with the new round of PPP loans in that the business will actually have to show some sort of reduction in gross receipts from 2019 to 2020. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of gray matter in the middle of all these things that we're talking
Right.
about.
I
And so,
understand.
again, you almost, I hate to oversimplify any of this stuff, but yes, you will have to show some kind of COVID-related impact to be able to get this.
Which is different than with the first round of PPP loans. But again, as Mark says, all the more reason to consult with a tax professional that you know that you work with. Question here about will there be assistance for people who have medical bills related to COVID, either direct or otherwise? Are you aware of any type of assistance of that nature?
You know, I haven't seen any kind of direct assistance for medical bills. Obviously, there was some additional funding for state and local governments to, beef up their own local hospital systems and provide additional PPE and things like that. But I and it's 5,600 pages long, by the way, in case you haven't actually read this bill yet. And so I have not made my way through the entire thing, but so far I've not seen or heard anything about assistance for medical expenses.
I would respond to this individual. I'm not aware of any specific reimbursement for medical expenses, but this is one instance when you certainly, if you do have additional medical expenses, might be one instance where you want to talk to a qualified and experienced bankruptcy attorney to know what your options are. Those unpaid medical bills can turn into judgments and then wage garnishments or garnishments of bank accounts. I'll repeat one more time. We are offering absolutely free initial consultations. We're offering them by phone or video. You can call us at the number on your screen, or you can go to our website and fill out a form, and we'll get back to you and set up a time for you to talk to one of our attorneys. Mark, question here. Is this going to be the last round of stimulus? I don't know that either of us can really answer that question, but what are your expectations?
Yeah, I sure hope not. This really is a Band-Aid on a breaking dam. Again, they allocated $25 billion to rental assistance programs in the United States, but when you split that up among the 40 million people that need help, it's really not that much money, especially considering the fact that a lot of these people are not just 1 month behind on rent. A lot of them are several months behind on rent. And so you can do the math, 40 million average rents in the United States are about $1,000 a month, and that goes up or down depending on where you live. So that's a lot of money, and that's just 1 month.
Yeah. Of course, big thing that we're unsure of here is we have a new president coming into office, a new administration, and we're not really completely sure as to the makeup of the new Congress yet, depending on the outcome of the senatorial elections in Georgia. So there are a lot of moving parts out there right now. Mark, for somebody, and you've talked to a lot of people that are behind on their rent, you've helped a lot of people that are behind on their rent. What type of general advice are you offering these individuals right now, in addition to what we've gone over so far?
Well, I think one of the most important things that people forget to do is to communicate with either your landlord or your bank, right? A lot of people, they just want to hide from the problem because they are not aware of any solutions. But, what we found is, and it certainly is not true in all cases, but we found that a lot of landlords are willing to work with tenants that are willing to communicate with them. When you go silent, they get nervous, and then the landlord feels like their only recourse is eviction. So definitely try to stay in communication with your landlord and with your bank, and especially on the mortgage side. A lot of these bank servicers, they have programs that you might not be aware of. So you may learn something important. There may be a program that will help you and defer some payments and help you get caught up down the road. The second thing is if you find yourself in a situation where you are actually being evicted, um, a lot of people, and it's surprisingly a large percentage of them, don't show up for their eviction hearing. And in those cases, the judges have no choice but to grant the evictions. And so it's very important, even if you think you're going to lose, and you may, but it's still important that you go, because I have been firsthand witness to judges that will look someone and say, "Have you signed the CDC declaration yet?" And the tenant says, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And that tenant not showed up, that opportunity would have been foreclosed and they would have been evicted. So definitely show up. You should also reach out to your local bar associations if you're just flat broke and can't afford any help. There are pro bono attorneys around the country that certainly will help out in situations like this and explain the rules and at least let you know what your rights are so that you don't go in completely cold.
That's excellent advice. It's always been an issue for the people that we advise that have financial problems. Um, they kind of put their head in the ground and they become overwhelmed. And to our viewers, it's just the last thing you need to do. There are options available, and the courts are there for a reason. If you're served with a lawsuit, whether it be a collection lawsuit or it's an eviction type proceeding, respond, show up in court. As Mark says, you may lose, but it's not going to be any worse, certainly by showing up, and you may learn of some rights that are available. And I know in many of the districts in which we practice, there are plenty of pro bono attorneys available in the courthouses that will step up, and many sympathetic judges will step up and make sure you're aware of your rights and the relief available. If a viewer is in an area that's not served by the Vine and Bodas law offices, most consumer bankruptcy attorneys are offering free consultations at this point. So you can reach out and learn your rights, know what your options are, and do it before there's a crisis. Do it before you're a day before an eviction or a day before a foreclosure or your car's about to be repossessed. Reach out and ask for help in advance. Mark, you talked about getting in touch with your landlord or your mortgage servicer. I think it's also important to document those type of conversations. What advice do you give folks in that regard?
I always prefer that the conversations are by email or even text message, just some kind of, especially when you have to go back to court and say, I tried to make a partial payment. If you just had that conversation and the landlord said, I won't accept that partial payment, it's really hard to prove that happened. But if it's in a text message or an email, you at least have some documented proof that you attempted to have a conversation and that you weren't just trying to evade the issue. So I think anything you can do in writing is always better than in person. But I've had people where they've taken the CDC declaration and hand walked it into the leasing office, and I've had them.
Mark, I think we just lost your audio there.
Oh, okay. Am I back
there
now?
we are. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's
I've
all
had
right.
certain situations where I've had people hand walk in their CDC declaration to the landlord's leasing office, and I've had them actually turn their phone on and record themselves giving it to the landlord, so there's some record. Because quite frankly, a lot of the people that we deal with, they don't have computers, so they're not able to print the declaration in order to sign it. They don't have email. They don't have a scanner. They don't have a way to deal with these things. And so we've actually, in the last 10 months, by myself, I keep a whole stack of those CDC declarations in my glove box, and sometimes have to drive around town and drop them off to people that don't have any way to print this thing out, just so that they can get these things in. So technology has been something of an issue, especially in the lower income communities.
Well, fortunately, as you said, many more people have cell phones today, and whether it be a text message, whether it be a video, anything you can do to create some sort of record of what transpired is important. If there is communication by telephone or representations made, and this often happens with mortgage servicers, because although the landlord may be local, the mortgage servicers often at the other end of an 800 number. I tell people if they're promised something, get the name of the person you talk to, make a record of the time of the conversation, the date of the conversation, and if it's something important, send a letter confirming the conversation or the representation that was made. It's not difficult, and a lot of our viewers know that you can go to the post office and fill out the little green card, and you'll have a record of the communication and that it was received by the person you sent the letter to. But as attorneys, Mark and I will tell you, it's much more difficult to have you testify as to what the other party said and prove it than it would be if you had some sort of record of that conversation. So I had a question that just came in here. If the eviction, I think what the people are talking about here is something you alluded to earlier. It's not the eviction process that stopped, it's the actual eviction itself. These people say that they received a summons from the court and they thought that the eviction process had been stopped. I think it would be good, Mark, if you could just go over one more time, if somebody receives an eviction notice, what steps they should take to protect themselves at that point.
Well, the first thing you should do is if you get an eviction notice, and there's different kinds of notices, and this is a function of state law, right? So every state has different rules. But for example, in Texas, they have to give you a notice that says you have to vacate the property within 3 days. If you don't voluntarily leave, then they can file the eviction suit with the court. But any part of this process, even if you haven't gotten a notice yet, it never hurts anything to give your landlord a copy of this CDC declaration, which, by the way, if you don't know where to find that, you can actually look on our website, which is dallasevictions2020.com. We've got a PDF version of it on our website that people can go to. And you can just print that thing off and give it to your landlord. If you're actually in a court scenario where you've been served with actual court papers, you need to also send a copy of that to the court. And so, and in a lot of cases, at least in Dallas County in Texas where I am, a lot of the judges will automatically just reset that case for some time period after the moratorium has expired. So of all the cases that we've gotten abated in the last 3 months in September, they're already docketed for January hearings. But now that this CDC order has been extended through January 31st, my expectation is the courts will automatically reset those for February. But again, this is a state-by-state issue. It's a judge-by-judge issue in a lot of cases. But fill out that declaration, assuming that you actually meet each of the elements that are listed on there, and give that to your landlord in such a way, preferably scan it in and email it to them so you've got an actual electronic record that you sent it. We've actually had several landlords that say, I never got that thing. And we were actually able to produce the emails with the attachment showing that they did, which has been very helpful in getting these cases slowed down.
And to our viewers, I'll make sure that document is also available on our Facebook page and on our firm's website, which has been referenced several times during this broadcast. But it's an important form, and I know I've mentioned it several times, but I want to say it one more time to our viewers. You can't just sit back. These things don't happen automatically. There's an eviction proceeding. Make sure you step up and do the things you need to protect yourself. If you're behind on your mortgage payments, behind on your rent payments, get in touch with your landlord or your mortgage servicer. Reach out to either a pro bono attorney through your local bar association or call one of our bond and bonus law offices if you're in Alabama, Tennessee, or Mississippi, and We'll just have an absolutely free conversation and talk about your options and what your rights are under the law. We're doing them by phone or video. We're doing them from the safety of your own home or office at no cost whatsoever. We want to help you. Mark, you mentioned also the best use of the money that people will be getting at the stimulus checks. And I want to go back to, I made a note here. My general advice had been to tell people to save that money and have it available for whatever they may need, food, transportation. You made an excellent point, though, that they may want to use some of that money to pay their landlord. Why is that? Why do they want to do that?
Well, again, in order to qualify for the protection under the CDC order, one of the things that you have to certify that you've done is at least made best efforts to make partial payments. Now, best efforts might still result in zero, right? If you've got no money and you can barely afford to feed your kids and put food on your table, your best efforts might still result in $0. But to the extent that you've actually made an offer to pay something, even if it's refused by the landlord, that's pretty good evidence that you have made best efforts to try and make partial payments. So, and really the whole idea behind these moratoriums is to create enough delay so that the federal government can put rent assistance dollars into the hands of renters and landlords uh, while we hopefully get to an economic recovery so we don't have this issue. Because the worst thing that anyone can do from a policy perspective is have everyone evicted and living on the streets, and then the next week send out $25 billion for rent assistance. It's too late at that point. And so, this new bill does allocate $25 billion just for rent assistance. Under the federal law, it can be used for up to as many as 12 months of rent. And it also provides for utilities and a special program in this round that wasn't in the last one, where if you're a landlord, you can actually apply on behalf of your tenants so that you can get paid, which I think was a really smart way to incentivize landlords to participate in the program and keep people housed.
I agree, and I read that portion of the legislation, and of course the landlord needs to get the tenant's permission and cooperation, but the landlord, and we forget too often the landlords. This is certainly a tough time for the tenants that can't afford to pay their rent, but landlords that also need the income from that rent to pay their bills are being impacted by this. So yes, landlords can participate. They need the tenants' permission to do so, but they certainly can participate. Mark, I do want to thank you for participating today, and I'm going to close out here shortly because I want to respect your time. But is there anything that I've missed here that you think is important for consumers to know, or at least as much as we can?
Did I lose your audio, Brad? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Well, I can't hear you, but there you go. Now you're back.
All right. So the question, Mark, was anything in general terms that we may have missed that you want to get across to viewers with respect to their rights?
I think we've covered, all of the relevant rights here, but I think one thing that's important to get across to people is this right here is a perfect example of why your participation in the political process matters, because we all need to be jumping up and down and telling Washington, D.C. that they need to stop politicizing these issues and actually get help to the people as soon as possible. Because quite frankly, even though I'm happy they passed this bill and the president signed it, this should have happened 5 months ago, and it should be a much bigger number. And everyone's been posturing and doing all these horrible things. And I think we all need to stand up together, regardless of your political party, and demand that they start looking out for the people and not for themselves and their own political futures.
I could not agree with you more. And again, this isn't an issue of being red or blue or Democrat or Republican. It's a matter of making sure our elected officials in Washington and in our state capitals are listening and that they're doing what's best for you. If they're not, let's elect somebody new and get them in place. But Mark, I again want to thank you. I teased at the beginning of this episode about you being a lawyer that normally deals with bigger issues, with tax and corporate type issues. But in truth, there are no more important legal issues. You and I went to law school to be able to help people that need help. And the work you and the other attorneys that are working with you in Dallas is just great. It speaks so well for our profession. People in Dallas are fortunate to have you. I appreciate you joining me today. I can't underscore enough to all of our viewers, be proactive with everything we've talked about, whether it being making sure you get your stimulus check, whether it's protecting yourself from eviction, whether it's working with your mortgage company to keep your home from being foreclosed on. Reach out and talk to people. Don't stick your head in the ground. There are plenty of people to help, and we at the Bond and Bodas law offices want to help you. We've been doing this for over 30 years. We know these are tough times. We know people are unable to pay their bills right now, and you do have options. We're offering absolutely free initial consultations. We're doing them by phone or video. Please reach out for help if you need it. No obligations. We're just going to talk to you about what your rights are. The information shared by Mark today will be available on our Facebook page and on our website. So if you know somebody you think may benefit, refer them back to us. 2020 has been a tough year. I'd like to tell you that 2021 is going to be a lot better. I do see a light on the horizon. There are vaccines that are starting to go into effect, but we've got a long way to go, folks, and we need to stick together. One more time, Mark, thanks to you and the other attorneys in Dallas working with your program. On behalf of all of us at Bond and Bodas, on behalf of Mark, we wish all of you a happy new year, and we wish you many good things in 2021. Thanks for joining us today, Mark. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks for having me.